Welcome to the Truth for Your 20s podcast. My name is Katie. I'm a proud girl mom. I've been married 20 years and counting. I'm a keynote speaker to sororities nationwide and a passion to be who I needed when I was younger.
And I'm Shaina Webb, proud big sister of 5 girls, Chattanooga content creator, high school coach, and your resident 20-something co-host who definitely doesn't have it all figured out yet, but loves talking about it anyway.
And together, we are here to bring a little truth, encouragement, real stories, and laughter to your 20s.
Woo! And we're back.
And we're back. Welcome to the Truth for Your 20s podcast. My name is Katie.
And I'm Shaina.
We're so excited. Today, we are going to talk about how we found our person. I get the opportunity to speak to sororities all over the place. And anytime we do a Q&A, never fails. This is always like one of the top questions. So we just thought we would like kind of a get to know us. And, you know, people love to hear the how you met your person story.
People love to know your lore. And also we'll try to share our stories too, because I think it's always good advice to hear when I see people who I look up to, like listen to how they met their person. And we'll try to drop some random advice along with the lore in here, because definitely not perfect.
Random advice and lore like that. Maybe we should rename our podcast.
Yeah.
So that's what we're here for today, and it's going to be good. I've heard a little of Shaina's story. She's heard a little of mine. We kind of did a get to know each other, obviously, you know, as we were dreaming up this idea, and she has a great story, and her husband and her are so cute. So I can't wait for you guys to hear it. So you want to go first?
I guess I will go first.
Yay.
So I talked a little bit about this in the intro episode, but I was kind of boy crazy, I guess, growing up in grade school, and I don't know if it was just because one random time in middle school, my friends and I, like, we made a list of who do we think is like going to get kissed first? Like, who do we think is going to have their first kiss first? And I was at the bottom of the list. They thought it would never be me. And I don't know if that like flipped a switch in me or like what, but I ended up getting my first boyfriend my freshman year of high school. And then pretty much after that, I almost always had a boyfriend. It would be like, I would date a guy for a year and a month, which just seemed, I don't know if that was like my absolute fed up point, but it was like I would date a guy a year and a month, and then like it was not enough recovery time. I'd jump right into another relationship, and then after that jumped into another relationship. And so it was really just like I always found my validation in whoever I was dating, and that was just how I became almost. It was like I couldn't even, my opinions were almost always whoever I was dating. I found my identity in that person. And as I was preparing for this episode, just like looking back at my old journals and diaries, there was one time when I was looking back at this and I was like really making a profile of who I was able to later on see how clear it was. But I like to say this is a good example of how I was in high school. I just felt like I my self based on who I was dating and in like my successes and who that person was. So like if I was dating an athlete, I was really into sports, or like I was dating a theater boy, I was really into theater, like really into school based on who it was. And it did help me. Definitely, I remember, especially shout out to one of my boyfriends who helped me pass my AP test. Like, so like, anyway, so I really was finding my identity in who I was dating and not in Jesus. And my passions were not really my own. And so going through that, obviously I'm not figuring out who I am because I was always dating someone. And like I said, all my past relationships were about a year and a month. And I also think it was because I didn't ever want to quit, and I didn't want to like have people not like me. I was definitely a people pleaser, straight up Enneagram 3. And so I remember my first relationship, I was like ready to get out of it, but I was too scared to like upset him. So I remember praying to God. I was like, please give me a reason, like a good reason I can break up with him so it doesn't seem random. And it was just funny because God did give me a reason, but I'm not going to go into all of like the lore of my boyfriends because this podcast is not about them. It's about me and what I learned. But I will say that it was so cool looking back at it now as a married person to see how God was working and molding me and growing me in those relationships, because each one of them taught me something about what I looked for in a person. And my mom likes to joke that it was like all the best things about those past boyfriends like rolled into one is Cameron. So it like helped me learn something from each of those relationships in like who I could be as a wife. And it helped, God was using those relationships to help me grow into who I could be for Cameron one day. But the biggest thing I like to tell my sisters. I have 4 younger sisters, if you missed that in the intro episode. And then and just, like, this podcast is, like, the biggest thing I like to say, because looking back at it, was I don't regret any of those relationships. Now, were there bad things that happened and, like, things I wish I could change? Yes, absolutely, like any relationship. But I never look back at those relationships, and I'm so, so happy I can say I never wish it never happened, because each one of those relationships taught me something, and I learned. And I had to learn things, like, I was definitely not perfect. I was in the wrong a lot, but it always helped me learn and grow. And a big thing about that was I'm so glad that I was able to stick to my biggest boundary, which was I didn't have sex with any of those guys. Now, did I go farther than I wanted to a lot of times? Yes, but you're when I talk to my sisters about this, or you guys, like, and even Katie, you had mentioned, like, what is the story you want to tell with your dating relationships? Like, when you are with your forever partner one day. Now, I'm not saying like this is for everybody, but what for your mental health and your, like, conscience, I guess, it really helped that I never crossed that full, like, soul ties boundary, because it just it is so crazy how much it can impact you and it stays with you. Now, there were definitely things like when you go farther and you still have, like, ties and you still have memories, and it can still affect you in past in, like, your future relationships and everything, but I'm just so thankful that I can look back at my past boyfriends and just remember the time and know what I learned from those relationships. Now, definitely boundaries and how far is too far was a huge thing I struggled with all growing up, all in all of my dating relationships. But looking back at it, I'm just so thankful that I was able to stick to my boundaries. Now, I'm not saying like everyone is like that now, and obviously I'm not going to go into everybody's lore, but there is so much joy and recovery too that can come from when you do go farther than you want to. And God uses that to restore, and everyone has a different story. But it was definitely a huge part of my story, was like trying to figure out boundaries and how far things were. And like the biggest thing for me, I think, was just having to figure out what I liked and who I was as a person. So, a long story, that's just a lot of mess. I don't even know if it makes sense. But going into college, I was dating my final high school boyfriend, I guess. It was summer 2018. And like Katie likes to say, the breakup that broke you.
Preach.
And so my final high school boyfriend, we dated into freshman year of college, and we broke up in, like, the fall of my freshman year of college, and that was really, really hard because it was, like, my first real, like, I really loved him, and it was hard, but we just weren't I was so far into, like, not knowing who I was at this point that, like, me and him did not have the same, like, future goals and alignments, and so that's ultimately why we broke up, because we're like, we just really like each other, but we don't have the same, like, future goals and faiths and everything. And so when we broke up, though, I was, like, very done. I was like, "These breakups suck. It's so hard to break up." That was, I guess, my 4th breakup, like, and this one was, like, really the one that broke me. And so healing from that breakup looked different from the rest of them, because I was like, I'm not jumping into another relationship anymore. Like, I want to figure out who I am, and I don't want to have another breakup. So it led to No Boy 2019, which is the term that I coined. And it really came from listening to Mo Isom come and speak at chapel one day at my school. And she talked about her year without boys, and it really spoke to me out. And God was like, Shanna, you need to do a year without boys, because I, like, didn't even entertain the idea of going on dates or anything. It was No Boy 2019. A boy texts you. Like, I literally remember responding to a guy and being like, sorry, I'm on No Boy 2019. And I just owned it. And that year, 2019, was so, so good for me, figuring out who I was and, like, what I actually liked. And so sometimes I'll be telling this story to my friends and they're like, oh, I need to do a No Boy 2019. But, like, it was a serious, like, it wasn't just like, oh, I was just going to do it until I, like, found someone. It was a very intentional, I was diving into who I was with God and what I actually liked, so that next time a guy came around, I wasn't just going to jump into a relationship for fun, because I knew I needed to find my identity in Jesus and not who I was dating. And so after 2019, so much growth, so much, like, figuring out who I was, and some humbling moments. But we enter 2020, the year of COVID, if we remember.
Oh, yes.
And I was actually supposed to go to Austria and Hungary that summer on a global perspectives trip with my school. And COVID canceled it, and so my plans changed, and I actually ended up working at a summer camp that still happened despite COVID. It was a it was called Camp Ozark. It's a very popular camp. They, like, had all of us get COVID tests, and it was a very, like, high production, like, they paid for everyone to get COVID tests, so we still had this summer camp despite it being 2020. And I remember on the first day, just, like, that's when I met Cameron, and the rest is history. No, I'm just kidding. It was really, really cool because that's when I really saw how God had been working in us because I was obviously going through, a bunch of past relationships and just did the whole No Boy 2019. I was not about to just jump into some random summer camp romance with this guy. But it was really cool because God had also been working in Cameron. He had also had serious past relationships and was also ready to just stop dating and like just dating for fun and like date seriously. And so I do think that that really sped up. I mean, it was God working. It was God working because we were both in similar positions and ready to take things seriously. Now, at summer camp, it was really fun because we just got to know each other. We didn't have our phones at this summer camp, which I also think was a big help because we couldn't do the typical thing, which is you find a guy and you stalk him on social media and you send him to your group chat and you guys like, what do you guys think? Like, we couldn't do that because we didn't have phones. We had to physically go up to each other and be like, meet at this tree at 10 p.m. and we'll hang out or like whatever. Like, I guess it's the olden I always say we met in the olden days, like, way because we didn't have phones and we couldn't stay up texting, we had to actually talk face to face. And so during all those late night talks at Camp Ozark, I remember we just went over, like, our lores and what we had been through in our past relationships and, like, what we were looking for, and so that really helped because we had all this time without our phones to just talk and get to know each other. And I remember just thinking, I've never met a guy like this who is so respectful of like boundaries and like wants to get to know me. And so it was just such a great breath of fresh air. And I don't think I would have found that if I hadn't like intentionally been through that No Boy 2019 year where I was figuring out what I wanted. And it's funny because a month before I left for Camp Ozark, I made a checklist in my diary of what I wanted in my future husband. And it had all the like must have checks. And then there were like some bonus check boxes like dark hair, wears glasses, like the super bonus ones that I was like, well, it's not a deal breaker, but like it would be cool. And it was so cool because when I met Cameron, it was all the boxes were checked, like same, like there were very specific things on there too, like musically inclined or like gets along with my family and is like a brother to my sisters, that type of thing. And so it's just been so cool seeing like when we were dating, seeing how he checked all of those boxes. And a big thing that really helped Cameron and I's relationship is very early on, we had like a boundaries talk and we talked about like what our relationship traumas, I guess, were together. And so that was super helpful. Now, in me and Cameron's dating, did we have like some really hard things we had to work through or like I would say like it's good to have a good fight or argument or just something you have to go through together before you end up getting engaged or married to a person because you need to see how you would react in hard times. And
Yeah.
so it was helpful to go through things like that with Cameron while we were dating. But then yeah, I guess this is kind of the end of like we dated through college, we got engaged my senior year of college and then we got married 2 months after graduating from college, and so it was just super cool to see how God used past relationships to, like, mold me into who I could be to be a wife for Cameron. Now, that's my story because it's very different from a lot of my friends who are more on, like, didn't have a lot of or, like, didn't date so seriously. I mean, we'll dive way more into it in the next episode too, talking about standards and everything, but all that to say is it's cool, I think, to look back and see how God used my specific story to meet Cameron. And obviously, nobody's story is going to be the same. And I also want to emphasize like, I'm not trying to say that there's only one right way to do it and you have to have these specific boundaries, but there is not because the gray line is a gray, huge area. And I just remember my biggest struggle, though, like in relationships and stuff, was always like trying to figure out what to do because I didn't have a big sister to talk to about it. And another huge reason why Lee was so good for me was it was the first place I had ever heard girls talking about their struggles with relationship boundaries. And I was like, oh my gosh. And it helped me so much to finally be able to talk about it. In high school, I never talked about the boundaries because it seemed taboo. I was like Googling. I remember literally Googling, like, I didn't even know. I don't know how TMI we should get in this podcast.
I mean, I'm here for it,
I
whatever you
remember like literally Googling, like, I didn't know that fingering was a thing
Yeah.
until it was, like, pretty much happening, and
Yeah.
I didn't even know it was a thing because there was no one talks about that, not at church, you don't really talk about it in your friend group. I didn't have a big sister, and so it was hard to go through that alone, and so then when I went to Lee and I heard girls open up about struggles in their relationship, I was like, "Oh, people talk about this? I didn't realize." And so I was looking back through my journal and I remember I was reading this entry just now, like this morning, preparing for this episode, and I wrote down like it was the first time I had heard girls talking about relationship struggles and I realized I wasn't alone and I realized I had a safe space to talk about it in my life group. And it helped me so much in my relationship with Cameron because I was able to talk about it and have like accountability and stuff. And so I think that is a huge, huge for any girls who are listening and have the same question of like, how far is too far? Like, you just have to talk about it with someone and that will help so much. If you're going through it alone and your only person you're talking to about it is your boyfriend, then the gray area
Yeah.
is it's just forever and there will be nothing that's too far or whatever because yeah, when you're in the heat of the moment, there's not a good time to have the talk of
No.
the boundary talk.
No.
But anyway, I could talk forever and ever and ever about this. But my main thing I want to get across is like, if you're by yourself, it's going to be harder. So it's really good to just have someone to talk to about what you're going through in your relationship. And you have to figure out what your own boundaries are because it's going to look different for different people for sure.
You said so many things. So I love it. I
I
love it.
just rambled.
No, I love it. I want to make sure give a shout out to Mo Isom. So I'll
Yeah.
link it, but I had the wonderful opportunity to email her. I'm sorry, interview her forever ago on this podcast. I love her. If you don't know who she is, she wrote Sex, Jesus, and the Conversation the Church Forgot.
Yes,
10 out
and
of
that's the
10.
book I read that inspired No Boy 2019. So it is a great book, definitely. Because again, the church they're not like, okay, high school girls, we're now going to talk about like
Yeah,
what happens in the car when you're like driving around the park at night.
right,
Like,
right. And I love what you said too, that like you decided beforehand. And I know
Mhm.
there's some gray area, of course, but like you decided beforehand. Well, I know there's some gray area, like I said, how far was too far, but you decided
Mhm.
beforehand where your line was. And um, I get that question a lot too when I'm like doing mentoring and stuff. And I would say like sometimes it's the wrong question, like how far is too far, and sometimes it's like how close can we get to Jesus? Mo Isom says, um, I knew virginity, but I didn't know anything of purity. Anyway, that's a whole we can 3
We'll have
episodes.
another podcast about that too.
But yes, so many. And I also love that you said that when you met Cameron, I was like, oh, I've never met anyone like this before. And
Yeah.
that's definitely similar to my
And it
story.
truly and I kind of forgot about sharing this part in the lore drop, but it was the year of prayer beforehand, and I'm not saying like, "Oh, if you just pray, you'll meet your husband," because that is obviously not always the case. But it is the prayer is what shaped me into finding someone that I could actually date well because I actually knew who I was and I was confident in my opinions at this point and like what I wanted, and I wasn't just looking to Cameron to answer the question of who is Shaina for me. And also, it was great because Cameron was in the same place. He had been through these past relationships too, where he had to learn what kind of boyfriend and now husband like he is going to be. And so it was really cool how our stories lined up and God brought us together at that time.
Yeah, it's so cute. I love it.
Shout out Cameron.
Shout out Cameron. Hey, hope you're listening. Okay, thank you for sharing that. And by the way, if you're watching on like YouTube, she brought her journal.
So this journal, I have many journals, but this journal actually, I would recommend. I think I saw a girl on TikTok talking about it, and which is why I started doing it. But when I started dating Cameron, I would write letters to him and put them in this journal. I would obviously talk to him too, but these were letters for myself almost that I was like, in the first entry, it's like, I'm either going to give this to Cameron one day when we get married, or I will be burning it if we break up, because it's a good, like, sense of closure, I
Mhm.
guess. I never had to burn it, which is
That's
awesome.
good.
But it also, like, looking back at it, it helped me so much, like, write out what I was feeling, which helped me, like, understand what I was going through. Because a lot of times, especially in the beginning of a relationship, it's, like, so fast. It's like a roller coaster, and it's so much fun, and then you're, like, figuring out all these things. So it really, really helped. I'm a huge supporter of, like, writing things down. And I also had like my personal journal that I kept at Camp Ozark because we didn't have phones. So this was like where I was like texting basically. I was like texting to myself. Anyway, huge supporter of like journaling, and it helps a lot when you're trying to figure out when you don't have the words and you're
Yeah.
in a conversation with the person you're dating and you're like, I just feel like I can't speak what I'm trying to say. I would suggest writing it out.
Yeah, it helps you in the moment. And then what a gift now looking back.
I
And
know it's so funny to read
yes,
and look back at.
it's precious.
Oh my gosh.
I love it. Okay, so I guess I get to share my
Yeah.
story.
Grab your popcorn and your coffee and
Yes.
settle in, you guys.
Yes. Okay. So Brian and I have been married 21 years. This is, we go back in time, but this is very similar to that he was unlike any guy I ever met or ever dated. But kind of before that, I I was I always say like looking for love in all the wrong fraternity boys and Bacardi and just looking for fulfillment in what the world says, right? Like we grew up in what I would say very, air quotes, Christian household, and there was no foundation to that. Like it was be a good girl, what is good? Like, go to church when you wake up in time and you feel like it.
Mhm.
There was very, very shaky foundation, if you will. So I didn't have any, when temptation started to come its way, I'm like, no, no, well, okay. you know? So, and that was with boys and parties and all the things. So my senior year in high school, I had a serious boyfriend. Like, of course I was 17. So of course I was going to get married to him, right? Like I thought he was my forever, but that didn't end. He moved off to college. He was a year older than me, so that didn't really end. That didn't end well, or the way I wanted it to end, obviously. But thankfully, looking back, my 17-year-old self didn't want it to end that way, but definitely glad that it did. Anyways, so I just kind of had no plan, kind of floating through life, not really knowing what I oh, he's cute, so let's date. Like it was just very happenstance, which is a terrible way to date. Fun fact. I highly recommend having standards, having a plan. But I went to college and as crazy as it sounds, and I share this when I go to like sororities and stuff, but being part of a sorority was like my first opportunity to belong to something bigger than myself. Like my parents were divorced. I wasn't really good in sports. And so when I became part of a sorority, it was like, oh, like I'm a part of this thing. And so that was like my first, you know, I guess raising the bar a little bit, as crazy as it sounds. Like I didn't want to date these guys who were treating me bad because I was an 80 pie and 80 pies have higher standards. It was it was still not obviously, I wasn't a Christian. It was still not like how I suggest to date, but it was a step in the right direction. So, anyway, so going through college and all that kind of stuff, and then my senior year, you know, dating the guy that I'm for sure is going to be the guy I'm going to marry. And he is the plan A. There is no plan B. We have talked about marriage, like everything is on the track and out of nowhere. And 100% think now it was God. Actually, I can tell this story. I want to write a book about this story because I feel like it's so like this moment. But anyways, okay. So I would say I was like throwing pennies into this make-believe wishing well of wanting this relationship to work out. So my senior year, I thought like, oh, well, if I don't have sex with him, then it's like this different thing and like this good girl wishing well and like it will work out. Like it didn't make any sense, but, I'm, like, trying so hard to everything I've done in my way didn't work, and so let me just try God's way, even though I didn't really know what that was, but it seemed like the good girl thing to do. So, we're at the fraternity house, and, like, he's drunk, and, everyone like, all the bad vibes you can get, and, like, he's like, "Oh, come on, please," like, begging me in the frat house, like, drunk to go home with him that night. And Shaina, on my lips was the word fine. How romantic, right? Like I'm just ready to like we've been dating over a year at this point. Like everyone else I know was like
Mhm.
sleeping with their boyfriend. Like it's fine, fine.
Mhm.
How romantic. I'm for sure God used another drunk fraternity boy to fall on like he felt we're like sitting on this little bench or I mean sitting kind of like on the ground really under a street light. He falls on me. I hurt my arm. I hear something snapped. I'm like, oh my gosh, what the heck? Like, everyone comes to my rescue. This girl who's a nurse major, like assesses the situation.
She's like, "I'm a nursing major.
Yeah, so
Make way."
sure, I'm only had 3 cocktails. It's fine. Anyways, so my arm's not broken, but our evening is. I go home, he goes home. Like a few days later, out of nowhere, not about this incident, not about anything, he was like, I don't think we should be together. And I was like, what? This is not the way the world is supposed to work. But I was devastated. I'm like, and it was just kind of this like, God, I've tried everything else. What the heck? I have a girl invite me to a Greek girls Bible study, which, a few weeks before that, I would have told you absolutely not. I go to Greek girls Bible study. I heard the woman at the well story, which I told a little bit about that. And so that was like a complete, like, oh my gosh, apparently there's so much more to life. Like God is amazing.
Yeah.
So I got fulfillment there, totally like 180 with my life. Anyway, so started going to church because that seemed like the right thing to do, right? but I kinda had, like, 1 foot in the bar and 1 foot in the church, and I'm not really sure where I belong. And Saturday night, I go to a bar because I didn't know what else to do with my Saturday nights at this point. I'm hanging out with another girl named Katie, fun fact, and she was like, "Hey, do you wanna go to church with me tomorrow?" And I was like, "I mean, yeah." And we were the only 2 people not drinking, by the way. Everyone else around us, like, was drinking. And so she asked me to go to church, and I go, and I expect this boring old guy to be preaching, and it was a youth pastor who happens to later be my husband, and I was like,
Mm.
"Oh, wait, he's cute." Like, I didn't expect what? I'm going back to this church. So, I started going back, realized it was a youth pastor. There was kind of a smaller church, so I just start volunteering wherever I can volunteer, and we would just hang out in a group of friends, and then here is how, like, I knew he was different and how I knew that, like, okay, this is, like, I want to pursue him. So, there's a group of us, and we are just going to a grocery store checkout line, right? And, all the magazines are right there, and there's, like, half-naked women, and there's, like, sex, sex, sex on the cover of everything, and we're just sitting in there in the grocery store checkout line, and he sees one of those half-naked, magazine covers and just flips it around to the backwards and starts talking, just returns to our conversation, and I was like, "What did you just do?" And he was just so nonchalant about it. He was like, "Oh, it's just a habit I have of trying to protect my eyes." I was like, "What? Is that a thing? Tell me more. I've never
Like,
heard."
more than sunglasses?
Yeah. I was like, "What?" And so I was like, I said he was like an alien in the best way, and I didn't know that was a thing. Guys did this? What? So, obviously, I was very interested. Fun fact, I was actually just telling my girls about this story because I didn't know. So, there was another guy, and this was kind of a fairly small group of, like, young Christians that went to this church. There was another guy that liked me and another girl that liked him, and so I was kinda like, "Oh, well, I don't know." And he was the same, like, I don't know, like, he likes her. I was not interested in other dude, and he was apparently not interested in other girl, so
Mhm.
it took us a while to kinda figure that out. Once we did, it was good. But we were friends for a while, which is good too, like, we were running buddies, which I so funny because he still runs, and I'm like, "Absolutely not." But we got to know each other, we hung out, and then finally he asked me to go to eat at Longhorn because we lived in a small town, and that was, like, the nicest choice, and I said yes, and yeah. So he has always, like, I can still truly attest, like, always had high standards of integrity. Like, there's all these kind of apps, like kids apps you can put on your phone to protect your eyes, and he's never had problems with this. But he's like, I don't even want to, like, we're talking about the line. Like, if this is a line, I don't want to dangle my toes over. His dad was an alcoholic and had a very he has like 5 children from all these different marriages and stuff.
Mhm.
And he's like, if I have that in my genes, why would I even try to drink and ruin my family, So he doesn't drink alcohol, not because he's ever had an issue personally, but why go there? And so again, like with the safeguards on his phone, like he's never had a porn issue, but why even try? Why even like have it at your fingertips? And so there's just so many safeguards he's always had and implemented, and just the highest standards of integrity I've ever known in a human. And so I would say he's the best example of Jesus I've met this side of heaven. And so yeah, he continues to show me that. And now we have 2 girls, and they're teenagers, which is crazy. But yeah, I probably left a lot out, but that's a little bit
I
of
know, it's just so hard to
a
fit it all into a short little episode.
right?
But it's cool, I think, like, hearing the moment, hearing that at the Greek Girls Bible study about the women at the well, and then for me, hearing Mo Isom speak and learning about the Year Without Boys type thing, like, there was these moments that kind of, like, were a switch almost for us,
Yeah.
and just also led us down the direction of finding our person. It wasn't like I found Cameron the next day, it took a year. Similar, it wasn't like you found him necessarily the next day or anything. And I think this podcast, obviously it being called Truth for Your 20s, like there's so many different truths, I think, in our stories, but that also just general truths of you aren't necessarily going to find someone when you're like specifically looking. You have to like make sure you're ready first. And then obviously there are so many girls who are still looking and for their person. And I think you just have to trust God's timeline. The biggest thing I feel like I learned is anytime you try to plan your life, like, don't even try because God is just gonna be like, "You think that's
That's
cute.
so cute.
That's so cute. You think you can plan your life. Like, let me just erase all this and put it all backwards and there, try that. Now try to make your agenda and planner and your timeline." So that's just funny. Another thing I think is cool is when I met Cameron and also just like it's funny that you said that there was another person who maybe liked you and someone liked him. When I first met Cameron, At Camp Ozark, you guys, if you've ever been to a summer camp, you know. There were 1,000 college students at this summer camp, okay? We're all without our phones. Like, there are just they have a thing at Camp Ozark called Met and Married. Anyone who meets their person at camp like, people are like, "Oh, who do I like?" Blah, blah, blah. Like, it's flirt fest, basically. And so it's just funny because there were I mean, the first week of Camp Ozark, I made a pros and cons list for 4 different guys. Cameron was one of them, of course. But, like, there it's not like we just instantly met. It's like we knew we were each other's person, although I like to sometimes say that. But it's just general, like, there's a lot of people out there necessarily, and I do think pros and cons lists will help because, again, you're writing stuff down. And I think I also learned that from my grandparents because my grandma always tells this story of when grandpa made a pros and cons list of Kathy, my grandma, and he dropped it in the hallway and my grandma found it. But anyway, it, like, helps you, like, figure, like, what if you're trying to decide between different people or, like, what direction you're gonna go, just any kind of writing. But pros and cons lists are fun.
Writing it out, yeah, I mean, it's important just to write like you said, it helps you think it out,
Yeah,
and then what a treasure to go back and
and, like, read. I know,
yeah.
I was, like, rereading my pros and cons list for Cameron, and it was so funny.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I always say that for making a big decision too, which it
Yeah.
is, right?
It is
And
a
so
big
whenever you're
decision.
moving or
Yeah.
deciding a major or whatever, like pros and cons, like writing it out. And then I've heard, this is just like a psychology thing, but flipping a coin. So like heads is going out with them, tails is not like then flipping the coin. And then how do you feel once that,
Yeah,
like, okay, you're excited or you're disappointed, then that would,
that
kind of
will
help
also
you.
help.
Yeah.
Yeah, but definitely, like, another truth for your 20s, I guess. I was trying to think of, like, just in my I mean, I'm still 26, so I'm still in the 20s, but I think really making sure you're doing something that feels aligned with you, which you'll be able to tell if you are, in communion with God and like yourself and writing things down and figuring out what you are, because there is obviously the Holy Spirit and like you can feel when you know something is not necessarily right.
Yeah.
So I remember in like my past relationships, I would still jump into them knowing they weren't right for me, but I just wanted that validation from guys. And I do still feel like I see that a lot in our culture. Just like you see on social media these perfect couples and the dream wedding, and you're like, I just want that. So I'm just going to ignore some of these red flags and just jump into this because this is what I want. And you can ignore the Holy Spirit or your conscience and stuff and just like jump into things. So the truth for your 20s is,
Don't do that.
yeah, don't do that. Or just, I think that goes a long way also with the accountability thing, like
Yeah.
having friends that you can be open about and not feel like you have to hide part of your relationship from them because you deep down know it's wrong. And that's in high school. I remember just like, well, I was never going to tell my friends what I was really thinking about my relationship with my ex boyfriends because I knew deep down it was wrong, but I wanted it to seem perfect on the outside.
I'm glad that you mentioned that because you kind of alluded to this on your story, telling your story, but having sisterhood, I mean,
Hmm.
it really is a beautiful thing and having accountability. Like, no, none of us are made to do life alone. And so having that, I mean, sisterhood is the best word for it. Is like find it. If you don't have it, just find it and be that safe place for someone else just to kind of talk it all through. And then one of my favorite things, like you alluded to at the beginning too, is what story do you want to tell? So when,
Hmm.
like right here, just now, I wish that my story was a little better at the beginning. I wish I had a story that I can tell my daughters that, I waited for marriage and my husband did and I didn't. And so that's something I wish I could tell that better story because that's, yeah, I mean, you don't think about it when you're dating and you're young and stuff like that. But it's important to think, what story do you want to tell? And you're writing that story in your dating time. And so yeah, 100% God is forgiveness. And like I'm not here to tell like, oh my gosh, if you show something that you don't want to tell, like you're doomed, like 100% not. But if you can think about it long term, which I think you did such a good job at, especially at a young age, thinking long term, it is a gift to you, it is a gift to your spouse, it is a gift to the story that you will want to tell one day.
Yeah, the forward thinking thing.
Yeah.
And I think I was inspired. My parents waited for marriage. And so I always knew that. And I just look up to my parents a lot. And so it was good to have that from the beginning. And then, like, my sisters and I talk about that too. But for those who don't have that, like, oftentimes you don't even know. Again, like, I think back to my younger self, like having to Google things because I had no idea what they were.
Yeah.
And it's like a lot of us don't have the blessing of like having a family who told us about, whatever, waiting for marriage and stuff. And so definitely everyone has a different story, and if you didn't wait for marriage, you're definitely not doomed,
Right.
like Katie said. But there is work that you just have to work through with God, and again, I think journaling helps, I think accountability partners help and everything, and, like, Cameron and I have talked through that a lot too because we've both gone farther than we wanted to before we met each other, and so then, like, having to work through that part in our relationship because it does come up later, getting intimate with somebody, like, your forever person, like, if you've done it before, there's always gonna be those soul ties, and that's just something you work through with your person. So never ever does it mean like you're doomed. Obviously it doesn't. There's so many amazing stories of people who have gone through, just experiencing the forgiveness of God, but it does sometimes like make you feel like your self-worth isn't as much or you feel bad. And so to save yourself some of that struggle and heartbreak, there are obviously boundaries you can put in place. But for those who have already crossed those boundaries, it's obviously not too late, but you will just have to go through the forgiveness piece and the working through it piece and everything, so
Yeah, and then draw the line in the sand. Decide, what matters to you moving forward. So no one can change the past, but you can certainly decide what matters to you moving forward. So
and
you
we could obviously do a whole episode on that kinda stuff. We
maybe we
kinda got away
should.
from just talking about how we met our person. Yeah, any other fun little stories you wanna tell about you and your man
Oh man. So
meeting
I
your
think
person?
speaking of forward thinking, just because obviously live longer and ahead of you guys and been married longer and stuff. I think thinking about who's gonna be a dad. I always say that young people, you get to pick the next fathers of the future children. Like no pressure, but it's a big deal. And of course, as being mothers as well, like it goes both ways. But thinking about that and then I always say if both of you are the same, then one of you is unnecessary. So obviously you're going to have conflicts because you are different, but that's also good because you kind of even each other out. Like I'm very outgoing, my husband's a little bit more shy, but also he's really good at planning stuff and I'm more of a homebody, which I know sounds counterintuitive, but it's true. Anyways, but together, like those are good. Those are sometimes a rub, but often balance each other out in a good way. So I don't know. Again, there's a million other rabbit trails to go
Yeah,
down, but
which, if you wanna hear another rabbit trail, our next episode after this is about standards
having
and
high standards versus being realistic.
yeah, because there's a lot of yeah. We'll dive into it.
We'll
Tune
dive
in
into
next
it.
time.
Before we get into 30 rabbit trails, just come and join us for next episode. And by the way, make sure you are subscribed to Spotify or Apple Podcast. Check out our Instagram page, Truth for Your 20s. And I'm excited. And please leave us a review. We don't want to know if you like it, what you want to hear more of. Yeah.
Yeah, because we make these truths for your 20s to be y'all in your 20s.
Yeah.
Let us know what you most wanna hear about next.
Okay. Over and out.
Yeah, see
Peace.
you next time.